First story is all about Israel. Now, this is kind of picking up on what I was ranting and raving about last week, how no matter who you vote for, Israel is winning the election. And that is because Donald Trump, through the Adelsons, now Miriam Adelson, previously her husband, now deceased, Sheldon Adelson, and other Zionist funding Kamala Harris, and the fact that both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are supported by Bilderberg steering committee members via Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and Eric Schmidt for both sides, Harris and Trump, and that there really is no way around that. I mean, you can sit there and argue which piece of shit is a better piece of shit, and you can argue which is lesser of evil, but at the end of the day, we know what's going to happen. We understand who is still going to be running the show. That doesn't mean all hope is lost, as the title of tonight's show, which is Technocrats and Zionists Are in Control, but all is not lost, because we are going to be talking about all of that tonight. And this first one is focused on Israel. So this is a brand new article coming from Mint Press News from Alan MacLeod, who is a great journalist who I'm actually setting up an interview with very soon. So hopefully we'll have that on here, and he can break down not only this article, but he did another really great article recently about Peter Thiel. He's just killing it lately. So I want to get into his work with you guys soon. This one is called Revealed: The Israeli Spies Writing America's News, October 16th, 2024. So just came out in the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and read a little bit of it. It's saying, well, let's get into just the meat of it. Again, I encourage you to read it for yourself. But the main part here is that we have journalists. This one is Barak Ravid, a journalist who's been reporting on the Israeli bombing and everything that's going on for the last year. But what most people don't know is that he's also a former analyst with the Israeli spy agency Unit 8200. We're going to talk about Unit 8200, Unit 81, and the Talpiot program. This is what this section's focused on here. And as recently as last year, this Ravid was still a reservist in the Israeli Defense Forces group. But do you think people know that whenever they are reading this article from this person over at Axios, the article titled "1 Year After October 7th Attacks, Netanyahu is on a winning streak"? So, oh, wow, that's interesting. Let me read about this. Let me see. Oh, wow, this is, it's painting a viewpoint about Netanyahu, makes him look like a pretty good guy. And then you don't realize, well, the person writing it is a quote unquote former analyst with Israeli spy unit and was a reservist in the IDF. I mean, that's a pretty freaking big deal, but that's where we're at, and most Americans have no idea. Unit 8200 is the largest and perhaps most controversial spying organization in Israel. It's been responsible for many high-profile espionage and terror operations, including the recent pager attack that injured thousands of Lebanese civilians. And Ravid is far from the only Israeli ex-spook, and again, I put ex-spooks here. I think we should keep that in quotes because I don't know. I've heard people say this, and I think maybe it's a little silly. Who knows? But it is a question to consider. Are you ever really an ex-FBI agent, an ex-CIA agent? Is that bond literally so deep that you kind of always are serving in that role? And really, if you're out there looking at the world through the spook's eyes, or a spy for the government's eyes, and you have friends who are still connected to that industry, obviously, if you think you see something that's just concerning, or you want to report somebody, you know who to call in those agencies to get action taken. So I don't know if you really truly can say you are ever an ex. Now, it doesn't mean your opinions and your values can't change, but yeah. So they go into some more examples here. And first Alan goes deeper into talking about who Ravid is as far as being in the Capitol Hill Press Corps. He won the White House Press Correspondence Award. I mean, overall, the person definitely seems like a freaking spook. They've got a number of scoops, breaking stories. One of the stories, it says most of these stories that out of that award that they won. Let me just back up a little bit, where it said that he won the White House Press Correspondence Award. Says the judges were impressed by what they described as his, quote, deep, almost intimate levels of sourcing in the U.S. and abroad. And they picked out 6 articles as exemplary pieces of journalism. And most of these stories consisted of simply printing anonymous White House or Israel government sources, making them look good, and distancing Biden from the horrors of the Israel attack on Palestine. As such, there was functionally no difference between these and White House press releases. For example, one story the judges picked out was titled "Scoop: Biden tells Bibi 3-day fighting pause could help secure release of some hostages," and presented the 46th president of the United States as a dedicated humanitarian hell-bent on reducing suffering. Another described how, quote, frustrated Biden was becoming with Netanyahu and the Israeli government. So it just goes on with different examples how how close of a relationship this person has with the Israeli agencies, as well as Biden. Apparently, Biden gave him the award directly to him and gave him a big hug. It says, like a brother. And it just goes on saying how he's made a name for himself by uncritically printing flattering information given to him by either the US or Israeli government and passing it off as a scoop. I mean, that's pretty much the classic role of a mouthpiece for the establishment, right? And you just take press releases or things that the government's feeding you, and you might even think like, oh my God, I'm so amazing, I worked to this point, now I have access to the White House, and never consider that maybe they're feeding you information that they want you to print, and none of it is threatening them in any way. You just think like, oh wow, I've made it, I'm part of the Washington Post or Axios or whoever, and I'm getting breaking news fed to me from, you know, a source in the White House. I did this because of my skills and everything. Could be true, could be another motive. So here's some examples of some of this quote unquote journalists headlines. Scoop: Biden tells Bibi he's not in it for a year of war in Gaza. Scoop: White House cancels meeting, scolds Netanyahu in protest over video. Biden running out of patience with Bibi as Gaza war hits 100 days. Biden-Bibi clash escalates as U.S. accused of undermining Israeli government. And basically, MacLeod here is saying that this is a, quote, relentless whitewashing of the Biden administration, and that this has even drawn mockery from different people on the internet, just calling it out. But of course, this person is not the only one. He goes further here describing Unit 8200, which I'm going to tell you more about in just a moment. And then he does show how there are some other journalists, like this one, Shakar Peled. She spent 3 years as an officer in 8200, leading a team of analysts in surveillance, intelligence, and cyber warfare. She also served as a technology analyst for the Israeli intelligence service Shin Bet. And in 2017, she was hired as a producer and writer for CNN and spent 3 years putting together segments for Fareed Zakaria and Christine Ampour's show. Google later hired her to become their senior media specialist. So works for the Israeli spy agency as a technology analyst in the Israeli intelligence service with Shin Bet, and then goes on to work for CNN and Google. You also talk about Tal Heinrich, who went to work for CNN after being a member of the 8200, spent 3 years at Unit 8200, and then went to field a news desk producer for CNN. And he provides more examples. Anat Schwartz, ex-Israeli Air Force intelligence officer with zero journalistic experience, hired by New York Times. And it goes on from there, and it just continues to describe it. And at the same time, also describing how Israel is censoring their own people and censoring stories about them. And so we touched on this. You guys, it shouldn't be a big surprise. I mean, especially, this has been my one thing. I really want to give credit to Ryan, of course, Christian over at The Last American Vagabond. I haven't dissected every single minutia, every single element of the October 7th attack and over the last year. James Corbett did some great documentaries, but generally speaking, I think anybody who really doesn't understand that there's no way in the world that the Israelis didn't see some level of an attack coming with all of the intelligence apparatus that they have, just like there's no way, it's nearly impossible to imagine that on 9/11, the Pentagon, one of the most protected airspaces in the world around DC, somehow was nearly penetrated because of, you know, hijackers and with pocket knives and living in caves and things like that. These stories just don't make sense. And so I'm going to play you 2 quick clips, because one of the ways you hopefully have heard about this is through my documentary series, The Pyramid of Power. If you go to thepyramidofpower.net, check out season 3, which, by the way, I think is, it's hard to say which is my favorite, but this one is definitely an amazing one, between the foundations and the nonprofit industrial complex, the banking cartel and the future of money. And then episode 12, the crimes of the intelligence community, which actually is our longest one yet. I try to keep them all under 30 minutes, but chapter 12, crimes of the intelligence community, I talk about British, American, Russian, Israeli, and Chinese intelligence agencies. I just couldn't cram it in. I think it comes out to be 45 minutes or something like that. But there's a whole section about the Israeli intelligence networks, and I want to play a quick clip for you guys. 2 of them, actually. We're going to play 2 quick clips from the Pyramid of Power, because what I'm saying is that there's no way that the Israelis would not have known that this attack was coming, based on the vast intelligence network that they have, from spying on cell phones, internet traffic, spying on human beings, spy satellites, AI, of course, all these sorts of things. Like, there's no way, it's not reasonable to think and logical to think that they could, this attack could happen and they would just be totally, oh my God, we're shocked, we're completely surprised by this. There's no way we could have foresaw this happening. It's just not realistic. So I'm going to play you 2 quick clips from the Pyramid of Power, chapter 12, and then I'll be right back. In this chapter, we are going to take a look at the history of the international intelligence community. We will be looking into the history of the British, American, Russian, Israeli, and Chinese intelligence agencies. We will focus our attention on some of the most impactful and dangerous activities committed by these 5 agencies. As with all of our investigations, we are only scratching the surface, and we highly encourage all viewers to follow the links and suggested reading in our transcript. The simple fact is that these 5 nations and the intelligence agencies which have been trained by them have been involved in a number of high-profile crimes known to much of the public, as well as lesser-known crimes which are equally disturbing. Various actions taken by the modern intelligence community include overthrowing governments, funding drug trafficking and gun running, spreading propaganda through the corporate media, spying on their own domestic populations, as well as foreign populations, targeted assassinations, and even accusations of trafficking of children, which we will explore in an upcoming episode of this series. In our chapter on the corporate media, we reported that in 1975, the U.S. Senate organized the U.S. Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations, otherwise known as the Church Committee. Church and his team were tasked with investigating abuse by the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Internal Revenue Service. The Church Committee investigations are well known for revealing many illegal activities by the intelligence community, including the discovery of Operation Shamrock, in which the major telecommunications companies shared their traffic with the NSA from 1945 to the early 1970s. There was also a discussion about a poison dart program that could cause someone to have a heart attack. And of course, there were the infamous MKUltra documents, which revealed the CIA's efforts to manipulate and control the human mind. The Church Committee's final report, published in April 1976, also covered CIA ties with both foreign and domestic media.
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA?
While Unit 8200 is an important piece of the Israeli intelligence puzzle, 2 lesser-known programs also deserve attention. First, the Talpiot program is another so-called elite program under the Israeli Defense Forces, which has been hosted by Hebrew University since 1979. Talpiot has a couple meanings in Hebrew, but it is generally translated to mean stronghold or tall turrets. The program was initiated by Professor Felix Dothan and Professor Shaul Yatziv of the Hebrew University, with the idea of harnessing human creativity at a young age and training recruits with outstanding academic ability in the sciences and leadership potential. In a rare instance of mainstream media reporting on Talpiot, a 2007 Wall Street Journal article described Talpiot as, quote, the country's most selective institution. It accepts 50 students a year and trains them in physics, computers, and other sciences. Its mission is to create innovative, tech-savvy leaders capable of transforming Israel's military. Soldiers picked for Talpiot aren't expected to fight like ordinary soldiers. Instead, they are selected for a, quote, ultra-competitive, grueling, fast-paced program designed to give them the best educational and military training possible. Talpiot recruits are chosen for a decade and taught by, quote, some of the world's top minds in mathematics, physics, and computer science, as well as some of Israel's top strategic leaders from the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Just like with Unit 8200, graduates of Talpiot have developed a habit of forming tech companies. Once a graduate leaves Unit 8200 or Talpiot, they take what they learned for the IDF and apply it to the Israeli economy. Talpiot graduates hire each other and help each other find jobs once in the private sector, which has resulted in a rapidly growing tech industry in Israel. As a result of the startup culture produced by these elite intelligence units, Israel has more companies listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange than any country except the United States. A perfect example of this pattern can be seen in the life of Zohar Zisapel, who has been referred to as the father of Israel's tech sector. Mr. Zisapel is credited with starting 27 companies in the last 30 years. All right, so those were both clips from the Pyramid of Power documentary series. Again, you can find that at thepyramidofpower.net. That was chapter 12, The Crimes of the Intelligence Community. Everything in there is sourced there. I highly encourage you to check that out, read the transcripts, dissect it, learn more about Unit 8200. You learn more about the Talpiot program, Unit 81. And as I was saying there in that clip, and as Alan MacLeod's article was saying before we cut to those videos, this is not just, a few Israelis who work for the IDF and worked intelligence and now work for CNN or Axios or something like that. It is that, and yes, they're in the media, but it's also what I was just describing, that these people are going into the intelligence sector, the tech sector in Israel, and then they're going and starting companies, international companies, not just companies based in Israel that do Israeli business only, but companies that do worldwide business. And Whitney Webb has reported on some of this with Carbine 911. They're one of the companies that is starting to replace some of the old traditional 911 emergency services systems and do it through, like, you call through a cell phone and they can like activate the camera and remotely see you. And there's some concerns about these Israeli spooks starting all these tech companies, and what that's going to mean for Americans and for people all over the world as it relates to their privacy and their liberty in the long term. So highly encourage you to check out those articles. Everything that I'm covering will be listed at theconsciousresistance.com once we wrap up tonight. The post for tonight will go up shortly after, and then you can catch all the links, everything. The first article is coming from Mint Press News, and then, of course, thepyramidofpower.net.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.